Okay, we have a workshop today regarding the riverfront. The River's Edge. The River's Edge Park. We received about $6.2 million from the state. And we're using that money for design. And so we're gonna get an update on all that going forward. Let's go around. Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Mike John, Ramsey County Commissioner for District 6.
Victoria Reinhardt, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 7.
Krista Martinson, District 3.
Claudia Klinkhammer, Redevelopment Manager, Community and Economic Development.
Josh Olson, Community Economic Development.
Carrie Collins, Deputy County Manager, Economic Growth, Community Investment.
Joanna Berg, County Manager. Maureen Moran, District 4.
Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner District 2, and feel free to have anything over on this table.
Paul Craddock, Commissioner District 1.
Chris Lankowski, I heard the word parks and I came running.
All right.
Parks Group.
Hey, Nail Partners.
Kylie Hazelwood, Nail Partners.
Sophia Deborah, speaking from Huntington.
Hi, Jennifer O'Rourke, Government Relations.
Amy Wadsworth, Government Relations.
Eric Peterson, Government Relations for the example.
Well, the folks online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I think we'll do intros for the folks online.
Great, I can start. I'm Lindsay from AECOM, supporting Claudia in the River's Edge project, and I'll pass it over to Sonia, also from our team.
Hi, Sonia Jax-Brone, Senior Landscape Architect, working with Lindsay and Matt, who can introduce himself next.
Yep, Matt Busa, Landscape Architect with AECOM.
Christian Lin, with AECOM, I lead our urban design and planning practice, and I've sort of standing in the background, watching the good work of Sonia, Matt, and team. I'm excited to share where we are with you today.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. We are actually very excited to be here. It's been a while since we've given you an update on this project, and so we're excited to kind of walk through a myriad of details, mostly centered around the design of the park at River's Edge. But much has changed and evolved in this project over the last 5+ years that I've certainly been in this seat bringing updates to you. Certainly beginning with the County Board's approval of AECOM as our development partner in January of 2019 after a competitive solicitation. This bold and transformative project navigated many complexities. I think we all did, but this project in particular navigated them through pandemic, and we continue to navigate through those lasting impacts where we know a lot more than we did several years and months ago, but we're continuing to work through it because this is a project that is multifaceted, right? Today's conversation will center around the public asset that is the park at River's Edge, but it's one integral and foundational element of a larger vision that is the River's Edge project. So we'll touch on those more general updates at the end, but I just want to kind of say that, this board has really been moving us and expressing boldness in this vision. I hope the vision, the design work that you see today reflects much of what you've articulated to us in the past. Certainly in late 2022, the board solidified, its interest in this exciting vision when the board committed the $26 million towards the project. That obviously set a very strong statement to the state legislature, which is why they did respond, maybe not to the amount that we wanted, but they did respond nonetheless to 6.2 in the spring of 23. So fast forward today, these are periods of time, but there's a lot of work that has transpired in that time, getting the agreements through the states, continuing to design work, navigating all these complexities and understanding them. I think that's probably more of where a lot of time takes, is trying to really understand what is happening in the dynamic aspects of park development, real estate development, engineering, costing, everything. So things are evolving and changing. But again, today, you know, we'll touch on the broader update of River's Edge. Claudia will lead that at the end. But today's presentation is really focused on the park at River's Edge, that public asset, which is a distinct but fundamental element of this larger vision. I'm joined here today. You are certainly got a little bit of a heads up from Sonia from AECOM, who will talk through the design, as well as Charisse from NAO, who will talk about our engagement efforts to date. And then we'll bring it back to Claudia to talk about many of these other aspects, but the broader River's Edge project. So I'll kind of send it over to Sonia to get us started.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to be here. We wanted to give you sort of just a broad contextual overview, just to remind you where we are sort of in space. The River's Edge project is located just outside of downtown on the sort of north shore of the Mississippi River, as shown here. And it's got good proximity to a lot of the interstates that traverse downtown and connect to the broader county and the region. Next slide, please. So more particularly, we took a look at the connections around River's Edge, and again, robust public transportation opportunities and bike trails and walking connections to the River's Edge Trail, the Samuel Morgan Regional Trail down by the river, of which our site is another amazing opportunity. Next slide. Our site is located at a nexus of two really important adjacent projects, one of which is indicated by the orange line that you see there, which is the extension of the Capitol Bikeway project in downtown St. Paul, which will be right across the street from our project. So very excited to have that coming through right as we're also looking at bicycle connectivity. And then also, excuse me, the River Balcony project, which is a larger project of which our site is a component. And Claudia, do you want to speak a little bit more to the details of the River Balcony?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, River's Edge sits sort of within the river balcony, right? We are one key component of the riverfront, key for a number of reasons, including, you know, we have funding, right? So our project is a little bit ahead of other projects. We also are at a key location. We have the last developable site of this kind on the riverfront in downtown St. Paul. So the opportunity is really significant for us here with River's Edge. But again, you know, within the context of the greater river and downtown St. Paul in general, we are, you know, very much closely tracking and partnering with our adjacent projects. As Sonia mentioned, the River Balcony is one of the key projects as well. You know, we meet regularly with them and other downtown stakeholders. The Science Museum is also sort of embedded in that River Balcony. They are also working on a major project, working closely with them. The city of St. Paul and their Public Works Department, we are coordinating with them on a number of infrastructure projects, bridges, roads, the Capital City Bikeway as another example. And so just wanted to kind of highlight the fact that, you know, we are a major project here, but we are, you know, sort of operating in concert with all of these other projects right along the riverfront, and together, I think we will be able to really transform downtown St. Paul. I also wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge the the extensive engagement that was done for the River Balcony. They released their basis of design report in 2022, and they did a massive engagement effort. And so those, we were part of that effort. And so, you know, using feedback that they gathered, we are also using that to inform our project as well. You know, there's no need to completely recreate the wheel with some of that engagement and re-engage folks on, you know, on things that they've already been asked about. You know, key themes that we've heard there are similar to things that we are continuing to hear, including connectivity, public space along the river, food and beverage options, and then walking paths. And so River's Edge is, you know, it is a standalone site, but I think it's also important to highlight that connection with the walking paths as well. So River Balcony is really more of a trail, right? It's called the River Balcony because that's what the project is called. But the idea with that is to create a 1.5 mile loop that will give visitors sort of something to do along the river. It'll give them an opportunity to recreate, to spend time, and then, come back to River's Edge and, have a cup of coffee or enjoy a cocktail or, hot chocolate at one of the establishments that will be part of our project eventually. The other thing I just wanted to note, as we are looking at the context here, is the downtown, St. Paul Downtown Alliance, just earlier this year released their downtown investment strategy. And in that strategy, River's Edge was identified as one of the strategic projects for downtown St. Paul and revitalization efforts. And so I'm not going to steal their thunder. In a couple of weeks, Downtown Alliance will be here to present and give you a much greater in-depth look at that study and that report. But just did want to, make sure that we highlighted that because I think that will certainly be one of the guiding tools for downtown St. Paul as we move forward in this post-pandemic world.
Thank you. So exciting. The River Balcony, did you say that's with St. Paul, the city of St. Paul and St. Paul Parks and Rec? Or who's leading you? You say
Yeah.
they, and I'm just curious who they all are.
Sure. Yep. That's a fair question. And so the Great River Passage Conservancy is a nonprofit organization that was started by the city of St. Paul. They are the ones that are leading the River Balcony project, but because of that connection with the city of St. Paul, they are working very, very closely together.
Mhm. And I'm glad they're working with us too, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
that's good.
Mhm. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. And I will turn it back over to Sonia to continue on with our project.
Sure, just a little bit, we're gonna get zoomed in a little further. Just again, the familiar.
1 second, Sonia.
So I'm happy to know that the balcony is not really a balcony, it's a trail, which I didn't know. Why is it called a balcony?
Ooh,
Why is it called a balcony?
I can answer that question. I think in part because there's been earlier iterations of this, which actually called for more of an elevated or a trail that extended on the edge of the bluff that is on this side of the river. So there was, the current iterations are much less infrastructure heavy, and they're utilizing much of the existing infrastructure, the park and the other public infrastructure. But I think in many ways, if you think of a balcony off the end of your house, it's kind of like that ledge that looks out. That's kind of been the concept.
Initial vision.
Yeah.
Are we gonna ever change that name?
Well,
I know it's the same.
I think it's funny because when it was first brought up, it was called the plinth. And so nobody's asking the question. Finally, I said, what the heck is a plinth?
Right.
Well, it's a balcony. It's like, well, then call it that. But it was raised. at that time.
And because I was here for some of those early conversations as well as many of us were, it was the Science Museum had a lookout over there. The depot was gonna have a lookout. There's a little bit of a lookout in some of the land there. So I think everybody, and then, the River's Edge project can have somewhat of a lookout. So I think we were all thinking of it as a continuation of this balcony-like thing with lookouts. So now I'm surprised that it's now, is it up behind that no, it's still. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners,
Right.
I think we'll focus, I think you're gonna probably see in later imagery
Yeah, okay,
how the River's Edge as a component of a larger vision fits into this.
yeah, okay.
The river balcony has grown in terms of a little bit of its scope because it's a collection of multiple trails and systems that with the whole theme of connecting people back to the river, both physically through River's Edge mostly, but also kind of emotionally and design elements. So again, turning the city downtown St. Paul back towards the water, which has been a large vision for the last 20-25 years.
Could I just quickly say, this goes even before the study you're talking. This goes back to the beginning of the century, the year 2000. When we first had the community input, okay? And the community input wanted a couple of things, and that was Number one was connecting to the river and access by the community. Those were the two principal values that came out of that. At the same time, we were working on the Union Depot, so there were like multiple pieces happening. And a lot of city people had gone the High Line along the West River in New York was built, and that was how they connected their river. And people came back with saying, well, we could do something similar. And the word balcony, High Line, they all sort of got fused together.
Interesting.
So this,
Highline's
this,
pretty- Highline's pretty cool.
this study is part two. There actually have been two studies that reaffirm each other.
Sonia, I think you pointed out.
Sorry, I apologize for stepping over somebody there. I'm just excited to show you what we've got coming up. So as I was saying, we're going to zoom in and focus on the River's Edge project specifically. You can see the Kellogg Mall Park as one of the connecting pieces that was noted in the river balcony, and the trails below and above here, as well as some landmarks that you're familiar with, of course. Next slide. When we were out there earlier this year, we took a series of photographs, just to kind of see what we had out there. But, as we were looking through them in preparation for advancing the design and this conversation with you, we picked a couple of these out because of the sort of the impact of the visuals, right? You can see the opportunities here, right? When you're up on Kellogg Market and St. Peter's in images 1 through 3 at the potential for wonderful views out over the river. And when you're down below and on the river in images 5, 6, and 7, you can really see how there is that opening that is ready to be developed right there in sort of the downtown, edge of the downtown urban fabric. So I'm going to turn it over to the NEO partners, ladies who are there with you in person, to introduce the engagement components that they've been working on.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As you all can see, I work on engagement at NEO Partners. I'm the Senior Community Engagement Specialist, and my colleague Kylie and I have had the wonderful opportunity to work on this amazing project. Being someone who is very familiar with St. Paul, being raised in the city, it's very exciting to see some of this development that will be happening in the future. And so some of the things that we've done with our key stakeholder interviews, as you can see on the screen there, is that we had 11 key stakeholders that are in the downtown area and surrounding areas that will be really key to understanding the possibilities in this space. And we wanted to make sure that people were informed of what is happening in downtown St. Paul. And so with Ramsey County, we came up with a very robust list of almost 80 key stakeholders, and we had some very strategic and very concise conversations with 11 of those stakeholders, and we will progress into moving into some of those other conversations as we continue engagement. In those interviews, we really talked for about 60 to 90 minutes with those key stakeholders about what this parcel of land really means to them, ways that interaction for constituents that work with their organizations would actually be able to be in the space, engagement that they'd like to see in the future for this project. And so we really were able to come up with a lot of our very distinct topics and issues that were important to people. And use that in kind of developing the plan for engagement as we go further. We also did a couple of pop-ups in the area. And at those pop-ups, it was really important for us for people to be, the general public, to be informed about what was happening. We wanted to understand where people were and understanding what the project was all about. And so we did lots of information building during that time. We reached almost 600 plus participants through those pop-ups, very strategic in understanding where people were and who would like to be connected to this project in some way. And those locations were at Central High School, at a career fair, and also the Capital City Bazaar at the St. Paul Union Depot. And so we really use those opportunities to enhance the experience for people and our experience on the project, understanding what people would like to see in the downtown area and specifically in this parcel of land. here is a word map of everything that people said. As you can see, downtown is the most prominent word on the map, and that was in connection to lots of comments about the spaces they enjoy in the area, places they've traveled, and connections that they have to the city, and in particular to the riverfront and where this space will be. And so some of the other words you'll see is energizing, safety, summer. And so we really will use this as a wonderful context to really roll out in additional engagement as we go further and working with ACOM and Ramsey County.
And now I will head back to Sonia here to talk a little bit about their project visioning.
Yeah, so as Charisse and her team were working with the engagement strategy, they and other stakeholders were invited to participate in sort of a foundational workshop with us, focused on overall project goals, design criteria, and programming priorities, sort of setting a baseline and a framework on which we could build the design and concept development. So next slide. We started with sort of defining what a successful park at River's Edge looks like. And here come some of the elements that were brought up in those conversations that focused a lot about the feel of the place, that it was going to be full of energy, full of life, programmed well, have something going on, be flexible to react to the needs of the public, be something that could be utilized by sort of people who lived and worked locally and adjacent to the park, as well as a regional destination, and really something that is unique, that encourages multiple visits to the site. So those were some of the successes. We also talked about challenges, and those will be on the next slide. And those really kind of coalesced around the connectivity, as well as how do we make that space really flexible in a way that is manageable, that is able to be consistent throughout the year, and that at the same time it gets us all the way down to the river and does not interrupt that connection opportunity. Next slide. So we continued our conversations, it was a full workshop, but at the end there were 6 key words that stood out and rose to the top as sort of goals that we wanted to make sure that we went back to as we went through the design and evaluated our progress against them. First one being inclusive. That was about welcoming in, you heard from Claudia about the comments that have been, there all along about making this a public space, right? Prioritizing public events, but also making sure that the public of all ages and ability levels can access the site and the connection to the river, which brings us to number 2. Obviously, the connection to the river is a huge, important piece, physically as well as visually, as we saw from the images previously. There's great opportunities for views as well as physical connection across the grade change there, but also connecting to the city itself, making it a part of the urban fabric, making it someplace that is recognizable and landmark, and not hidden away from view, just because it is incorporated into some of the development opportunities at the site as well. We talked about how playful and exciting elements could be included in the design, making sure that we're thinking about all ages, making this a really fun site. Playful meaning both, the ability to play oneself or watch and passively enjoy sort of the playfulness of others through art elements or sort of interactive activities. We talked about exciting, and the thing that I really liked hearing when we were talking about exciting things or things we categorize as exciting was, cultivating new traditions, right? That we wanted to make some new memories, some new reasons to come to downtown St. Paul and gather together on a regular basis. We also talked about the flexibility of the site, which I mentioned earlier, both physically flexible as well as programmatically flexible, temporary as well as permanent flexibility. And then the last element, but certainly not the least, was the idea of green, both in terms of sustainable technology and environmental benefits of the site that we can enhance, but also the green of the park, that this space was going to have lush vegetation and a feel of a park that would be different from some of the city streets there. So transitioning to a more natural and soft and green space there. We also took a look at what those kind of things would look like from a visual aspect. I threw up some of the images that people found engaging and that started to illustrate some of the ideas that we were talking about with these 6 foundational goals. One of the things that we all noticed kind of after the fact was almost every single image that was sort of selected and came to the top had people in it. It was really about, how do we activate this space with people, all this lovely stuff as well, but, with the people who are actually going to be there. And I'd like to take this opportunity to turn it back over to those of you in the room who would like to comment on sort of these foundational principles that we have been developing for the River's Edge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm super excited about this, and I'll just take this opportunity to say that many of us, if not most of us, are going to be out in Tampa next few days, and they have a great waterfront area that's transformed their entire region. So I'm going to encourage all of us to be looking at that for all the things that they were surprised by that. I've heard that, they were wanting to connect to their water, and they didn't know that it was going to be so transformative for the entire region, just Tampa, but all the surrounding communities are benefiting from the development. So we should, so let's all pay extra attention as we're exploring where we're going to be for this conference the next few days. So I'm super excited about that. And I'm really excited about all these different, values that we have. I was most curious about the play, and I'm seeing just some examples here, like what does that look like? Because of course, I think it's all exciting that we do all of these things. And so I just wanted to, say thanks. And if there was any other examples, I guess, mini golf and all those kinds of things would be all prime for use. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Victoria.
Just for clarity, just because we mentioned the river, the trails balcony, is that the City of St. Paul project, or is that something that we're taking on as a county? Do we know?
That's the city.
That is the city.
Well, it is the city.
Okay.
And they created the conservancy as the implementing arm
Okay,
of
so
the city.
they'll pay for it, right?
Yes.
To do whatever they need to do, okay. And so as I look at, I see a lot of programming, and my mind is just different now, what I see here from what we initially was imagining to be in that location. Because I think before it seemed like there was gonna be more restaurants and arts and places that people could, that was what I envisioned from the advocacy and the conversations we was having before.
Well, I think that's still part of it. It was neither one nor the other. It was all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I can speak to that as well. We are focused in this particular discussion very specifically on sort of the landscape and park elements and the buildings where those sort of restaurant and sort of supporting, or primary, depending on how you're looking at it, activities will be, are still sort of a work in progress. And so we are, sort of keeping that in the back of our mind as that we will be, creating an interaction between the building facades and the landscape as well. But we've got a lot of space, exterior space, to work with and do sort of park specific elements. So that's kind of what we have focused on in our presentation today.
One more question. Number 2, connected. What do visually connected to the river mean? Is it
Sure.
connected to the river or what does that mean?
So it's the opportunity to see, right? To see down there, whether it's an overlook or, you know, as you're walking down St. Peter Street, being able to see clearly out over the river. We're looking for opportunities to make those connections to the river when you're up sort of at the upper level, at the city street level. And as you are, you know, on the site, as you are enjoying your restaurant experience or your park experience, that you can always be visually connected to the river, even if you're not right on the edge.
So we're not talking anymore about being on the river, having access.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think it is a connection directly to the river.
Okay.
That's a principle and a, you know, certainly a design element that you'll start to see elements, you'll start to shine a little bit brighter. I think maybe where to connect the dots from your prior question, this River's Edge project is this is a public-private partnership. Both, you know, connecting the benefits that a private sector development might generate, you know, exciting spaces, exciting destinations, things like that, and combining it or bringing it alongside of a unique public asset, which is a new park. The benefit or the difference that maybe this project has from many other public-private partnerships, if you've heard that term and thrown around, is that this one's literally adjacent to a river. And so it's taking advantage of a broader set of things, the visual connection to the river. And I called this out specifically because you asked the question, but there are built into the zoning regulations that the city has and the comprehensive plans, they actually maintain view corridors that come down St. Peter and through the roads so that people who are walking down the sidewalk or biking down St. Peter, for example, can see the river or see, you know, it's not blocked off by some private development or something else. And so I read that bullet as a visual connection, not just immersive in the park itself, where you get to see these beautiful views and take in a beautiful location, but also that folks who are approaching the project can also see and understand that the river is in front of them, in their midst, so that it's also an enticement, right? Like to encourage people in to a location.
So really, it's not one or the other. That's why I said it's both.
So we have access to the river.
Yes. Physical and visual.
You got it.
Victoria.
And I wanted to go to number 1 in the inclusive side of things, because we have, in Ramsey County, we're very committed to the all abilities transportation network. And so when you say universal, I guess I'd like to know, what else, are you looking at? I mean, going down to the river is not going to be an easy thing for somebody in a wheelchair. Or even with strollers. You know, I mean, something other than just, you know, being able to walk down there. So that's one. And then in the playful side of things, there are a number of things that we've done in our parks. And I mean, we're not talking a huge space here, but it would be nice if we could bring in some cultural aspects as well. With the, whatever we put in there to be playful, because that also, I think, is respectful of diversity as well. So those are my 2 comments.
Thank you. And I'll just sort of double down on your first comment and inclusive and universal access. You know, at acknowledging your point about we've got a long way down to connect, where you'll see some different options where we are really looking to make sure that everyone has a safe and lovely journey down there. Like you said, whether you're on wheels or on your heels, you've got that in there. And also, and I may have overlooked this in my first pass through, but your comment reminded me that when we talk about inclusive, we're also talking about culturally and ethnically diverse, engagement, elements that are connecting to sort of the history of the place and the people who are there, right? Whether those things are changing in the present or acknowledging the past. Those came out in the discussions as well. We kind of sort of lumped them under inclusive, but certainly hearing your comment that they can be, executed throughout, in these different categories as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had another question. This is very exciting. So this will be a park. So will it come under parks, as I'm looking at Chris in the audience? Will this be programming done by our Parks Department, or will it be a combination of our economic growth department? I mean, who do you see doing this? Because Parks does a certain type of programming. This would expand some of that, I think, which I'm sure they're up for, but I'm just curious how we're gonna internally, how we're thinking of this space. And then while you're answering that, because I'm a biker and a walker, there's lots of people that would be walking here, so there must be a separate bike and walking paths, I'm guessing, so we don't want to run anybody over when we're on our bike. And there's a lot of electric bikes out there now, so anyway, I'm just curious about those two things. And maybe that's for further down the road.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McGuire, I'm gonna take the first stab at the first question there. As both Joanna and Carrie probably itching it. I would say, let's pause that conversation for a moment, in part because there's a lot that needs to come in develop and design of this park. It will be a publicly owned asset owned by Ramsey County.
Yeah.
And so my logical answer is, yes, it's going to be a Ramsey County figured out thing. How that is actually managed through Parks Department, CED, Public Works, Property Management, because all of these elements show up in parts and pieces through this project, and the skill set in which our staff have, it might just be, it's going to be a shared EGCI thing. Am I correct in saying that? But I think but this is a unique, I mean, but I think to answer that question, maybe in a little bit different way, is just acknowledge this is going to be a different park in the portfolio that is Ramsey County. It would be different if I was having this conversation with the city council as well, because there is not an exact peer of this kind of a park in the Ramsey County portfolio, in the St. Paul portfolio, and most, if not many portfolios, that here locally, regionally, and nationally. So we're cultivating and building a new bold vision here, and that's why it's going to show up. So there's going to be material next step conversations about that. On the next one, I think I would just pause that the second part of your question around how the accessibility happens. I think you'll see it'll start to show up a little bit more in these designs.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I would just, add, so I think this has been incredibly helpful in exactly the conversation we wanted to have sort of around specifically the goals. There will be time at the end as well for additional comments, but we do have a bit more to get through. So if that's okay, we'll maybe keep going. Okay, so Sonia, back to you.
Sure, yeah. So just to sort of get us back into sort of the physical characteristics of the site, here is kind of our existing conditions. The buildings that were there have been mostly removed. And so, we're looking at a really big grade change across connecting between Kellogg and Shepherd and the trail there. And you can see that on the next slide, sort of the grade change by the numbers, like how long the sidewalk would need to be, or the steps, or everything like that. And it's kind of a daunting thing to look at, as I think some of you picked up on already. And so the design concepts that we've been looking at are really approaches to how to address this, right? How do we start to make this grade change work on this site? So we've got that to contend with. And then on the next slide, you will see we have some additional constraints that we are going to be working with. One of which is the parking garage structure that is planned to serve the development buildings on the Kellogg level, that will also engage on the river, both the Kellogg and riverfront sides. And then you can see that there are clearance requirements to bridge over both the rail corridor and Shepherd Road. And then there is the tricky situation of, you know, how are we coming down when we reach the trail level? How do we get ourselves down there in a way that allows clearance to happen there by the river? So what we're talking about in the next couple slides is that sort of dashed white box. It says realm of possible extents of the lid. So what can we do within that white box to get us from point A to point B? So we have two concepts to show you. The first of which is on the next slide. And we call this sort of the sloping plains concept. And this concept sort of takes the form of a linear park, right? And these, because our site is almost 800 feet in length, if we take the whole site into this gentle linear park feature, we can make a very, very gentle slope happen all the way down there. And so we have lots of flexibility along this journey to do all sorts of things, right? We are considering in both of our concepts some of that dark green up against the faces of those buildings as sort of the activations with the building, right? So that'll be sort of flat and sort of engaged in the interactions between the assets from the buildings and the park there on that level, and then take that journey down to the river. You can see here that this concept overhangs the walkway a little bit and keeps the riverfront trail sort of as it is right along the river's edge. You can see in sort of the indicated by the brown boxes sort of opportunities for lifts or elevators to take you from one elevation to the next. And on the next slide, you can see a little bit more about how circulation can occur there. We haven't, to one of the previous speakers' questions, sort of sorted out whether we're separating or how we are engaging specifically bikes versus pedestrians. But all of the areas that are in orange here are completely ADA accessible and would also be accessible for bikes to ride or walk up these routes. You can see in the blue dotted arrows opportunities for connection directly to the parking garage, so that there could be an opportunity to park and go directly to the park if there was an event or a function in the park space as opposed to the building space that one wanted to attend. You can see in between the two center towers, the purple arrows indicate the upper level entrance to that parking structure below. And then there is a lower level entrance you can see there to the left of the image. So we can go to the next slide. So when we are talking about sloping plains, we haven't picked an aesthetic yet, really. There are lots of options, lots of conversations to be had about sort of the specific amenities and things that can exist in a concept like this. And so we wanted to showcase sort of the wide variety of choices we have to make as we move forward in the design. We're very excited to continue to have those conversations with you all and the team. At the end of looking at our concepts, on the next page, we did sort of an evaluation versus those sort of 6 goals that we had and we talked about at length at the beginning of our conversation. And we felt that the sloping plains concept hit a lot of these marks right off the bat. Inclusive, flexible, connected. The opportunity for green was significant, as you could see from some of those examples, depending on the choices that were made as we moved forward. Exciting and playful, we felt were not quite as immediate in this concept, but because there is lots of space and lots of flexibility in that space, playful and exciting elements can be incorporated as the design begins to be detailed and some of those decisions begin to be sort of solidified. So we felt this was a concept worthy to bring forward into the next phase of design. On the next slide is the other option that we're bringing to the surface here, the other concept that we felt was pretty strong. This one takes a different approach completely. We're really talking about focus on the connection at St. Peter Street very pedestrian oriented there as opposed to sort of vehicular oriented, making a straight beeline connection, emphasizing that view corridor that I believe Josh mentioned earlier, and creating sort of a two tiers connected by stairs, focusing on overlooking the river. Naturally, there are opportunities for accessible routes that parallel these stairs and take a slower and almost sloping plains approach down to connect those two terraces and the street level. This design looks at the opportunity to sort of scale back a little bit on the park space and have a little bit more openness to Shepherd Road beneath. It doesn't completely cover Shepherd Road, the full length of the site. There are pros and cons to that, especially because of the specific guard conditions that need to occur when people are overlooking sort of busy roads like that. The other feature that is different about this concept is the treatment of the riverfront trail. You can see the orange shared use path there is now elevated to kind of be integrated into the site. So as you're coming along, you would ride or walk up and you would meet everyone at that sort of central overlook location, and then work your way down towards the landing park on the other side. So everyone is incorporated into the journey across as well as up. And so it's not sort of two distinct things, they are intertwined together. And on our next slide, we have a little bit more detail about how circulation occurs here. Again, the orange indicating potential bike and ADA accessible routes. And then of course the grand stairway is an element of it in and of itself. Both this concept and the previous concept, as you can see by the dashed line that goes against the building facades at the top, that area is designed to accommodate emergency vehicles as well as vehicles supporting programming, food trucks, or other things that might be necessary to bring into the site to activate or program the site there as well. Again, opportunities were identified to make direct connections to the garage and elevator connections between the different levels that are on this design itself. And then you can see in the bubble out there, you can see how the trail goes up to the top and is no longer engaged at the Shepherd Road level for the majority of the site. As we did for the previous design, we took this concept and evaluated against our goals. On the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get there. I got there too fast. When we talk about grand staircases, there are lots of different options. So as we did with the previous, we kind of looked at the variety of different ways that we could incorporate sort of a stairs and a playful terraced approach to the design. And so you can see some of those examples here. How we can integrate lighting and integrate planting into this kind of a landscape. Now we'll check out how it evaluates against our goals here. So this one we felt was really had a lot of opportunity in sort of the physical layout of the design itself, with the stairs and the manipulation of the topography to be playful and exciting in and of itself. We felt that the connectivity of this one was really strong. We're making a very strong and intentional connection, visible connection to the urban street grid. We felt that it was somewhat less inclusive because it wasn't fully universal, because the stairs, would not be able to be navigated by strollers and people on wheels. But we thought that there was lots of opportunity for flexibility in this site, depending on whether or not we decided to take that space over Shepherd Road. We felt that green wasn't quite as strong on this concept, again because there was somewhat less space, but we felt that we were pretty strong on most of these goals, so we wanted to bring this design out as well. And so as we look at these two very different design approaches, we have been tasked to come up with a design that combines the best characteristics of both of these. And those characteristics that came to the surface to us were maximizing and integrating green space for flexible activities, making graceful transitions between the different levels, making strong connections to the urban grid and public awareness through those connections, that this was an asset for them to enjoy. Making sure that we're direct routes to the river and integration with the Sam Morgan Trail, and to create distinct overlook locations where those views from the river and that idea of a river balcony could be articulated in the site too. So that concludes sort of the update on where we are in the design now. And we'll look forward to talking to you again with some of the best characteristics pulled together for you.
Thank you so much, Sonia. So this represents what we've seen today and what Sonia has just walked us through. It represents the conclusion of the very first design phase for the Park at River's Edge. So, just want to emphasize that, design is a very iterative process, and, this is just the beginning, but where this actually ends, may look substantially different than both of these, concepts that we're seeing today. We just need to start somewhere, based on the engagement that we've had so far and kind of the goals and priorities that have risen to the top. This is where we are today, but we are just kind of at the beginning. So we've got a lot of work to do yet. And related is will be additional engagement work. And so I'd like to invite Charisse back up to speak a little bit more about that next.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious, as I know the interrupt, but and these two designs are obviously really different. Is there a tentative dollar point price tag for these? I personally like more green, and I like the idea of covering Shepherd Road because the exhaust, we don't need that in the parks, and we're thinking healthy connectivity, but I suspect that's way more expensive than the stairwell, but I could be wrong. So I'm just curious as we're getting feedback, if we're taking that into consideration.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we don't yet know the answer to that, which that is going to be one of the first things we do in sort of our next design phase is start to dig into that.
So looking at the designs here, which one is all accessible? All abilities, which one of these designs?
I think both really could be. There are different elements and different ways in which each of the designs, can be accessible to all. In some, as Sonia pointed out, the sloping plains is sort of more in the sense that, there's sort of that gentle path, but then in both there's elevator connections. So I think in different ways, they both are.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, my initial gut is that elements like playful and exciting are really subjective.
Yeah.
Someone might think a boat show is exciting. I feel like lots of people do. I am not one of them. So we all have different definitions of what might be exciting and playful as well, where someone might see the staircase as playful. I see it as someone with like fear of heights, like vertigo, like, oh, that's. So just noting that, while I think we should be thinking about these things, the other four factors seem much easier to quantify, and it seems more clear that one design is superior in those elements. So as we're thinking through, noting that these less subjective factors, while we might want to more subjective factors, we might want to consider them, how we weight them against the more objective factors could potentially be different.
Yeah, and I think you're getting at a really good point there. And I think it speaks to one of the things we've also heard in engagement, which is really the importance of programming and operations, right? And how that will play into the designs and really in the functionality of the parks. And how folks who will come and when they'll come and why, right? And so, maybe there'll be, an opportunity for yoga on a Saturday morning, and then there'll be, a fair for kids or whatever, and I don't know, something else in the afternoon. And so, but I think that's absolutely right. And so something we'll kind of tracking through more so, I think, through that programming lens, but appreciate those comments for sure.
Yeah, I have a question about the activation of the spaces, because when I see this, I actually don't see any spaces for active, like, for that type of use. Unless if my scaling is really off, which probably is. I just wanna know, like, what is that space? And I think that this is just very crucial for us to also get right too, just because I've had several conversations with, our legislators too, where they are asking questions about like, how are people getting there? What is going to be there? What's going to, like, how will cultural or ethnic communities be able to access this? And will it be relevant to them? So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. And then the other, just some ideas that I've just have looked or seen for other places too. And I know that this is different, but in Wayzata, like the Panaway, I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but it's right next to the lake there, and they have like, just gathering spaces, like I think a splash pad, but large thing, but it's across the street from several of the small businesses along there too. So like people go and dine there. They have this like experience of like outdoor dining in the winter time that were like globes or something like that. So just those are just some ideas that would be really great for connecting folks to the river.
Anybody else? You hit on part of the question. To what extent is Parks and Rec being part of the designing it? Because the design should follow the type of programming anyway. So we could react to that. I don't know what that programming would be. And then in terms of, I don't know how you would label this, unprogrammed space. It reminds me of over about 20 years ago, I'm sitting in Baltimore on the wharf, and they got a big access to the wharf. And I'm sitting there and I'm all alone. And I bring the newspaper with me, I'm reading it, I'm thinking I'm having my lunch or something this evening. I was there for a conference or something. By the time I left at 1:30, I didn't realize that a couple of young people had shown up with their musical equipments, flipped up like a slat and plugged in the amplifier. Okay, it started having music. I didn't realize that to my left was a family who threw out a picnic blanket and was eating lunch. By the time I left, that empty water, because it's the bay, right? It's not a river. Was populated with all kinds of activities. And they really didn't need no programming except the capacity to handle all those. That's what I mean by unprogrammed space.
Yeah.
But we also need the programming to have the activities 12 months a year, right? For community to participate in. And that should be cultural and everything else.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get a sense, when are these ingredients gonna be fed into the formula?
So I would actually say they're in sort of being considered on an ongoing basis, right? So like the conversations about like the operations and programming are happening now, right? And Parks is very much involved with the design and with those, operational programming conversations, as are our other partners, right? The River Balcony or Trail people, right? Because they, we are contextually within sort of that, right? And so, the Science Museum, we met with them yesterday, and they're talking about stuff that they have going on, and they'll obviously have kids. So it's all happening now, right? And so because it kind of needs to, we can't move forward with design without that. So I think it's a good point you're making, and something that we are absolutely tracking as, as part of the project, as the park and the design evolves.
We are at the wide end of the funnel, right? Collecting all of the ideas and all of the thoughts. And then as we move forward into this sort of the narrower end of the funnel, we'll be able to go through the decision-making process to sort of make more specific moves on the paper, right? And it also includes, you know, the work that Charisse and her team are doing in sort of talking about which of those, that universe of opportunity that we have, is something that is desirable for the people of St. Paul too. So yes, we are thinking of them as Claudia says, but we are not quite through the sort of decision-making process and to a point that we're going to say, yes, we're going to have yoga here on Saturdays at 10 or whatever, right? We'll get there.
Mr. DeMarco.
I was just curious on the 6 project goals, are they weighted at all? Like as you're thinking of design criteria, is one more important than the other? I just personally am feeling like we have so much concrete in St. Paul and especially in downtown, and that this park was the one opportunity to get green to blue and people there in a healthier way, you know. We have a book about great staircases of St. Paul. We don't need another staircase. I'll just say that. I don't think we do. I think that's a lot of concrete. But we do not have any green space. I mean, there's 2 parks downtown, Mears, that is actually built in a way that you can't throw a picnic blanket down, right? Because they didn't want people camping there. And then we have Rice Park. Again, it's a small space, but there's not a lot of place to just, I want the kids to roll down the hill, right, in the grass.
Long way of rolling.
I would love to do, I would roll down that hill, right, and to think about how do we connect green to blue, especially as we're gonna put 4 more buildings potentially, that's a lot of concrete and not a lot of green connected to blue. So I just hope as we prioritize, you know, playful, inclusive, that we also think about the healthiness of the environment of downtown, not just like the big concept of how we draw people here, but like there's people living down here that need to get their feet in the grass, right? Or whatever it might be.
You know, but I just re-emphasize that because I've been hearing a lot from all kinds of folks about that very issue that it's usually in the context of these, you go down West 7th, you see all these big buildings being built up in smaller space, right? They maximize, we get it, we need housing, blah, blah, blah. But what's missing in all of them is green space. There is no green space for the kids. There's no green space, period. And that's becoming, as you build more and more, it's becoming more and more obvious that there is lack of green space. And I think that we need to really put that high on the list for us. It might not be something that as you engage community that pops up in their minds right away. It might need to be talked about in a different way, but it's important that we have as much green space, especially in downtown, which is all concrete.
Well, I'd like to see more green space as well. However, I don't know that I want to see kids rolling down the hill because the street is right there. Well, plus I was also thinking about what would I do as a kid? When it snows? Oh, yeah. I'd be sledding if there was a hill big enough to do that. But anyway, I think that there's a way to incorporate all of that and to make it so that you can tumble down the hill instead of going too fast. But I just, we need to, the draw, I think, is having it be more green space than not.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead,
Mr. Chair.
Or Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm just thinking about this just because it's really exciting too. When you think about the development activity, if you head west on Kellogg, you know, the Science Museum is proposing that big front yard play space for kids. And the whole, you know how far back the setback is for the Science Museum. They're going to be doing this big capital campaign, creating this kind of experiential playground in the front part of the museum. And so if you think about buses of, you know, kids and families coming down and utilizing that space, checking out the Science Museum, and then walking down and grabbing lunch, and then sitting on the hill and enjoying it with their family, you start to create this more experiential corridor, right? Versus just trying to do everything on this one parcel, but it's this more regional presence where you can spend the day. Let's go have lunch on the hill. And so in thinking about the green space, it's not just that, but you know, there's some real sloping challenges here that we have to wrestle with. But how do we maximize the passive space for the picnic with the programmatic space so that you can have a music group come down? You can have an art walk and do all of that other kind of more activated space as well. So just
So yeah, the theme, of course, I think we all support more green space. So as I'm looking at this, you know, and it looks like two different models, but you can probably tell me that maybe we're gonna have some combination of it, because one's the sloping, because there's more green space in the sloping model versus the staircase model, which has a lot of concrete. So is there, there's gotta be a, you know, is that what we decide is between the sloping planes concept versus the staircase concept? Is that what we're gonna have to at some point make that decision, or is we gonna have some combination of each of those? Cause I agree, I mean, we all want more green space, and I also understand we have challenges with the slope. But of course, I want all of these things to be happening there, and we do need more green space downtown. But yeah, do we have to pick between these two concepts?
No.
No, okay, so we can have some combination of it.
Mr. Chair, I was just gonna say, we're taking it in, and I
Yeah.
think it's helpful to hear the points of view of the pieces on what things resonate
Yeah.
with you.
Mhm.
In part because it doesn't show up in here, but I think to Commissioner Fretham's ask a little bit about, and even Commissioner Martinson around the weighting and how we do this.
Yeah.
I think one of those metrics, which will be hard and will not necessarily be able to be determined until after the fact when people show up, is the dwell time. How much time
Yeah.
people are actually spending in that space. I think what we learned, and I think during the pandemic, absolutely, that parks are the lungs of communities. I'm stealing that from somebody else who said that. So it's not me profound, but that they said it, and it took on a new and really a renewed
Yeah.
emphasis during the pandemic, right? Where people use these spaces to linger and to recreate, to relax, to recharge. And so I think, I think what we'll do is when we step into the next layers of this design work, I think what we are going to use is try to integrate those quote unquote metrics, maybe referencing other projects and like what they know and what they've learned, what works for them and what doesn't. But at the same time, what keeps people in those spaces? Because I think what you heard right from the outset through some of the images and what resonated initially with some of the people who participated in that process was people. People were in the pictures. And I think people will be the definition of success, whether they're there, they want to be there, they want to hang out, and they want to stay there. On the private side, they're going to love to hear those same things because that means they might be able to receive some economic value from that. But for the public asset that is, I think that's what we're trying to strive for, is spaces that people want to linger, and not places that are come and go and be gone, because we have a lot of those spaces, especially in downtown.
We do, excuse me, I think Christian has his hand up on the Zoom as
Oh,
well.
yeah, just quickly, I think actually some of my points were covered, but one thing that I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but we really want to also pay attention in our design to the heritage of the site, which really ties back to the green base. And so we do see that as a way. There's some storytelling that we think can happen on this site, and it can happen with either of these. And I would say, I know there's a lot of questions about which, sloping planes or grand staircase, but the idea is that both of these are very adaptable to what we want to do. They have a lot of flexibility. They're not prescriptive right now where they are. They need to be shaped and molded based on what we're hearing. And I think they're, we're getting great feedback, but I think, I'm not sure how much we talked about the heritage of the site, but that is something I know when we were sort of getting immersed in the project, that's something we felt we needed to, acknowledge and incorporate. And the last thing when we look at a project like this, we could see it as being a challenging site, having to negotiate 80 feet of grade, but we do think that really offers some opportunity as well, because where the space is a little bit more broken up and it provides more opportunities for a variety of types of programming tasks, more programming of spaces in different ways. And so you can almost see this as having a set of rooms along the riverfront where a lot of different things, and you can meet a lot of different needs by using these different elevations as you kind of make your way down. We want this journey down to the river to be part of the experience. It's not just a functional path. It's really, you don't see it as this long journey. You see it as, as built in as part of the overall experience of being in this place, and really giving people the opportunity and kind of giving them a reason to stay here.
Just, thank you for that. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was our board chair who said that parks are the lungs, because she said parks are the backyard too. I mean, because we have so many people that don't have backyards, in their spaces. So that's what we like about our green spaces. And so, I'm reminded too of being in, if any of you have been in Savannah, Georgia lately, they have built up their whole waterfront too. And it's, oh my God, it's so amazingly great for economic development, because people are biking and walking along. And it's not a ton of green space, but it is enough to have people be able to linger if they want. But my question is, can we touch the river at any point here? I just know that at some point, people want to touch the river, and I'm appreciating Christopher or whoever who said about the heritage of the river and things like that. And we just want to know, I know we can touch the river on the other side of the river, at the park there, but at here,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McGuire, this could be a point where I can make a joke about the river might touch you first, given the current situation. In certain areas, more not on the site, but adjacent to the site. But
Be seasonal.
yeah, but
just curious.
trying to remove that joke for a moment, I would say that is something we've been thinking through.
Yeah.
It's difficult in this segment, but when you look at it in the broader,
Okay.
yeah, aspects of the area, there is Upper Landing Park, which you kind of get a glimpse of it kind of on the edge there. It's the dark green that's in the corner of the picture. Is the part of the Upper Landing Park, and there is a moment there where you can touch the river. So if we look at them as a linkage between each other, yes, those opportunities can exist. Does it happen specifically on this site? It's possible. We'll keep looking and exploring it, but I think we're navigating a number of other things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on the heritage of the river? I feel like there's a lot of history, some good, some bad. When you say heritage of the river, what are you talking about?
Well, yeah, right. There's a lot of time that has
Sorry.
passed. I think specifically what we spent a lot of time on is kind of the native settlements that were along the river. And so that's, I guess when I said it, I mean, that's not to say sometimes, of course, there's a debate around the country about how we tell the story of our history. But I think in general, telling the story of the site is an important piece. But when I said I was specifically talking about the native settlement that happened here, specifically right here, near this, along this whole river's edge, in St. Paul. So
that, and then also sort of the natural history as well, in the conversation and the thought about that, the green, however we engage this in the sort of the park light aspects. We talked a lot with our stakeholders that we talked about, the native vegetation and what would evoke, being along the Mississippi River here if it wasn't all concrete.
Yeah. So it seems like you have two concepts. One is a sloping plane concept, and the other one is a grand staircase concept. with the sloping plains is more greenery than concrete. So we're making decisions about those two, I guess, perspective. And so I'm just wondering, do you have a plan, two things, do you have a plan to maybe engage the community in that design? And then the last one is, what is the budget? Are we gonna do design or do a budget, and that the budget would dictate what the design is gonna look like?
So I will jump in and answer the second question first, and then your first question is a perfect pivot to keep moving. I'm just watching the time and realize we are almost out of it. So would like to keep this moving, although this is a wonderful conversation. So budget, yes. So we are not there yet, but at our next phase in design, we will be looking at budget and evaluating also phasing of the construction of this project. It is massive. It is, you know, it was last projected to be something around $80 million. That was years ago. It's likely more expensive today, right? And so that is absolutely part of the conversation. We will not design something that is too expensive to build, but we also, you know, I think it's important to make sure that Ramsey County priorities are reflected in where we end up. So it'll be kind of striking the balance between those two factors. And then to answer your first question, I'm happy to turn it over to Sharice of NAME.
Yes. Perfect segue, Commissioner Rand. In our community engagement, I've been hearing so much from you today, and this is what I do. So I'm like getting very excited, hearing all of your ideas. I hope Kylie is back there typing feverishly about things that we can make sure we connect with community about. And we've actually been hearing a lot of this already in our conversations. And so just to, you know, go over some of the things that came up in themes so far, site activation was a very big part of what people communicated to us about. And in site activation, folks talked about the visitor experience. And I hear people saying experience often in this conversation today. And so we really talked a lot about that. They talked about the stream of visitors, how people are actually going to get to the space. We got into a little bit of conversation about how long people will be at the space. And right now, in spaces in downtown, we did ask a few folks, you know, how long, you know, are you in spaces currently? You know, where do you like to visit? What do you love about those places? And that all informs the engagement and then the design of the park. And then also we talked about recreation opportunities, things that people thought were missing currently in their experience. And so we'd like to try to fulfill some of those if possible, looking at the design of the space as well. Another part of our site activation conversations was the connection to the river. Almost every conversation we had, people talked about how they'd love to experience the river. And so, you know, understanding what that means to people, if it means touching the river, you know, maybe offering opportunities and places to do that and educating people on where we can do that, or if it means just being able to visually see it, like we discussed earlier. We're really exploring what that means to people in our next segment of engagement. And so we'll delve a lot deeper into some of those conversations and in the themes that we have today listed here. So another one is community. People talked a lot about wanting to be around other people, wanting to understand what's happening in the community and having that activation at the park itself. And so we talked quite a bit about that. We had lots of people discuss the cultural implications of a space and how they either feel welcome or don't feel welcome in spaces now, currently. And so we'll be talking to a lot of different stakeholders and continuing those conversations to see what that truly means to people and really try to parse out what, you know, people would like to see and how they would feel welcome in this new space. Management of the park came up as well. And I think people are really understanding what it takes to have a really successful space. And so when we talked about management of the park, a few things I wanted to bring out was about staff training. Some people, we talked with people who are in the unhoused community and how if there are people who need resources or opportunities to, you know, get services that they need, that people are trained and are able to assist if needed. And then another conversation came up about the maintenance protocols and like how to keep the space beautiful, right? And how to keep it nice and clean and accessible to folks in the city, in the surrounding areas. Another major part was wayfinding. How do I get here? Where is it? You know, what are the easiest ways to interact? And in those conversations, we got lots of great ideas about that really did identify some of the things that you saw in those designs about ways that people would like to access the parcel of land this beautiful park that we're gonna be creating. We'll try to get more information from people about what actually would be easiest for them when they're downtown in other spaces. How can you actually get to the space, and what will be easiest for you to actually access the space from coming from the Science Museum, or if you're in one of the buildings, one of the buildings downtown, and you have a housing appointment downtown, how do you actually get an opportunity to come to this space and know that it exists? And so wayfinding is a very big theme that came out of our early conversations too. And so all of you have kind of hit on some of those points. And so we're really excited to talk about some of the recommendations we have for the next phase of engagement. That will be phase 2 of our engagement. And so we really are guiding the principles of our next phase from what we found in phase 1. And so for future engagement, we're looking at lots of focus groups, right? And so, while we did lots of general conversations, we'll really get into talking with different cultural groups, people who represent the unhoused community, individuals from indigenous communities, so that we can really understand what people need and what, will really make this a welcoming space, and go back to some of those early goals that we have in creating a space for everyone. We also will do some survey implementation and analysis on the surveys that we'll be creating. And then also the next phase of engagement will really focus on public interest, and then also the stake in the park in terms of activation and programming, which I've heard here. It's like we have the visual of it, but what's going to be there? And so we'll really be challenging community members and the public to really think about what you'd like to see and what those activations could look like.
That last comments you
Yes.
made are really, to me anyway, are really critically important. I spent 10 years on the Riverfront Corporation. We cleaned up both sides of the river. Prior to Harriet Island and all that, it was pretty much wasteland on both sides of the river. You couldn't even walk it without getting dirty and muddy and everything else.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, at that same time period, Millennium Park in Chicago was being built. My brother lived in Chicago for 10 years, and I would take my kids to go visit. The difference between the community using those two parks, I could take you to the riverfront any weekend now, and you're not gonna see no families, nobody on Harriet Island. Now, the grass it's probably the original grass from 20 years ago. Millennium Park was, the grass completely wrecked in the first couple of months. That tells you how people utilize the parks. And that's why I think it's important that we really pay attention to those pieces of what people want there, the programming and all of that. That's what's gonna make the difference. The rest is infrastructure, right? It doesn't mean anything if nobody uses it.
Yeah. And an important part of our engagement is people-centered engagement. And so we want to make sure that, people who usually don't get to tap into some of these conversations are being talked to. And that's a really big part of what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and our job to do that listening.
We have our upcoming engagement schedule, general schedule about our pop-up events that we'll be having. Some of the pop-up events will be very creative. We'll think creatively about how we can get people engaged, giving them that experience, maybe seeing visually what the space could look like, and then, exploring what their ideas would be based on that. We have open houses that we'll do. And of course, those focus groups will be really crucial in exploring what you talked about a little bit earlier, just ensuring that people can use the space and it's somewhere they would like to attend and come to. Yeah. And then we'll also have stakeholder engagement. I mentioned earlier, we had a long list of key stakeholders that we'll continue to talk to as well.
And I would just add that as engagement happens, we will be sure to make sure that you all, know and can get the word out, help us get the word out when those activities are happening. So more to come later this year and into the winter. Thanks, Charisse. And I will bring us home in our last couple of minutes. We left the least exciting things for the end. So I'll provide some just general project updates. So I'll start with the current spending status. So as Commissioner Ortega mentioned, we received $6.2 million from the state in 2023. We are tracking to spend that full balance down by mid to late 25. So in about a year plus from now, that will be spent. That is on pre-design, design, and acquisition activities. Related Ramsey County Fund spending update. We received, as you're aware, $26 million commitment from the county board at the end of 22. We have tapped into $1.8 million of that as a, we're calling it a match. It's not a required match for the 6.2, but in order to round out our project budget to accomplish those pre-design, design, and acquisition activities, we have an $8 million project. So we did access $1.8 million of those to move the park ahead. Again, we are tracking that as only being used for the park at River's Edge, the public realm only. So we still have, a pretty hefty balance there to continue to move that project forward. Next is the railroad negotiations. And so we have been hard at work on figuring out the right strategy to approach the railroads. As you might imagine, it is a very nuanced conversation, and we want to make sure that we put our best foot forward when we come to them with the ask. We are working very closely with our partners at AECOM, who have relationships with both UP and CPKC, so we are working with 2 railroads, not just one. And additionally, we're also working with Regional Rail and exploring also, River's Edge is one site, and there's things that, we need from them. Hopefully we'll be able to find some things that we can also provide to help encourage them to work with us. But, then there's Union Depot, and between us is the East Building and the Ramsey County property in there. So this is all part of that conversation. We are expecting to have that asked to them very shortly. We're kind of just refining the last couple of pieces, and we'll get that before them. We know that this is a critical part of the project in general, but also, as we are going out and you all are advocating for us for other funding sources at the state, the federal levels, that everyone's looking at this as the gating issue, right? Like, there's no project if this doesn't happen. We are fully aware, and so we are doing everything we can to make sure that we put something forward that will be palatable and get us a green light here. So more to come on that soon. And then the last sort of site readiness activity I wanted to provide an update on are the Excel power line relocations. There is one power line on the River's Edge site, and there's a number of adjacent power lines that do need to be moved in order to accommodate our project. We are having active conversations with Excel. We've identified, a set of initial alternate locations for the lines, but, again, we're working with multiple stakeholders on those new locations. And so it is an ongoing conversation. We are hoping to have the locations identified in the coming months, which would then kick off sort of an 18-month fabrication and construction period. So, again, more to come there, but we are definitely making some good progress. So since we are
Hold on, just go ahead, let him finish. And then, go ahead.
Okay, well, and I was just gonna talk quickly, just kind of through the design timeline and process here. So just wanted to kind of show where we are. We're wrapping up the phase 1 right here, and as you were right on track with July of this year. So next up, we'll be initiating the pre-schematic and schematic design phase, which will be about 8 months. And also importantly, we will be bringing an RBA before you in a couple of weeks from now on July 23rd for that additional design work for the phase 2 design contract. And then just wanted to point out that we are currently on schedule to complete design work by early 2026.
Victoria?
Okay, well, I think that is a good timeline, except for Excel and the railroads. I mean, we just wrapped up one very small easement piece in White Bear Lake with the railroads. Yeah, it took about 20 years. I'm not kidding. I mean, it was just, and so whatever you do, the sooner you can get that in place, the better. But this is really aggressive when you're dealing with the railroads. And Excel hopefully won't be as difficult, but knock on wood, it could be more because there's not as much experience with them as there is with the railroads. But the further we get down this without having something signed Because we've had agreements and then they just say, and they seem to change staff like every other day. And so you have an agreement with one and then the next day they're not there anymore and you start over again. So I know that you've had experience dealing with them, but those are two really big ifs on this project.
Yeah, well, if I might just jump in there, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Reinhardt. So I want to just kind of preface this by saying we've been at it with the railroad. So this kind of anticipates, or the way that Claudia was kind of saying that this is, we're finally providing an ask. We've been providing insights and working directly with them. I think where this interplays with the design work, and I think given our timeline, you could probably acknowledge this is aggressive, but at the same time, in a normal sequence of events, per the eyes of our two railroads, we would come with them with an ask after this period is done. And it's a very risky proposition for anybody to fully design something and not get that approval until that moment. So what we have been approaching this a slightly different way, and we've learned a lot over the last 5 years, is that we need to advance the design work, and that's where we are today, to a place where they feel comfortable in understanding what it is that we actually want. It's the acquisition probably won't happen until well after this process, but they need to understand exactly what we're offering. And I think when we say strategize the ask, it's strategizing the parameters of all those things that are going to go into it, so that when we get 1 year, 2 years down the road, when we finalize the design and we're ready for construction, those permits, those approvals are completed, and in hopes, some of those things have actually already started ahead of time because we built the goodwill in part, but we've also built the design. So we might be able to acquire, we might be able to establish some easements, we might be able to do some things in the interim, but in a normal sequencing, some of that from their eyes would come after this. And that's what we heard from you in prior meetings was that's too risky. So where we're kind of doing is trying to do this in kind of a parallel path.
I was gonna say the same thing. We've been at this for a very long time. And I don't know why we haven't gotten some type of feel or idea about what they're gonna do, besides what you just stating that you need to do the design first and then get a reaction. Are we gonna spend the $2.2 million to do that on the design? Is that
On
what
the
we're doing?
acquisition with the railroads? That's my
No, the design, whatever you need to do at the end of that design, will the $6.2 million be gone?
And we will have secured those other things? Yes.
What other things?
Those acquisitional pieces. So I think at the end of the day, when we get past the 6.2, we'll be moving into a place where we're actually constructing and not coming to you with updates around design work. And this is what we need from the railroads. We've agreed that we've gotten to that place. So we're kind of doing these in parallel paths. But you know, I want to just kind of clarify where Claudia was taking us, because we've been at it, we've been talking it through. I think that as a person who's lived through this with the railroads for the last 5 years, the comfort level is continuing to rise. I think we're at a place, though, that we've done enough design work that we can now start to lay it out in front of them so that they, at the staff level, the management level, and the senior level, understand exactly what our intentions are, so that when it gets, 2 years down the road, this is an easier transaction than, what do you mean? We didn't know, we didn't hear about this. So we're really trying to kind of systematically get through that relationship.
Thank you. That makes sense to me.
Okay, and then we've got just a couple more slides here. We're almost there. So I did just want to share this. This is a little bit more detailed timeline of our phase 2 design work. And I'm sharing this because it highlights something that a couple of the commissioners have gotten at, which is breaking it down into like understanding the costs that are going to be associated with this. So this next phase is actually broken into pre-schematic and schematic. Generally, you would just kind of go right into schematic, but we're not really pausing, but we're taking a little bit of time out to do some additional due diligence in terms of understanding what the costs are going to be. We're going to be looking at some phasing scenarios, as I referenced earlier, just to make sure that we have a good understanding of what is actually going to be feasible, given what we have today, what we know, and market conditions. And so then once we have some additional information, we'll be able to make some decisions about how to proceed with our schematic design, but we want to do some verification before we move forward with this massive project. So I also want to highlight that any reduced phase that we would contemplate would still include a connection to the river. That will be happening sort of no matter what. I know that is a priority of this board and of the community, and so that is something that will be present in sort of any scenario that we might move forward with. And then the last thing, thank you, wrong computer. So next steps. So, as I mentioned, we need to initiate the phase 2 park design. I already talked about pre-schematic and schematic and what that means. So again, that is coming to the board for consideration on July 3rd. And then one other thing,
23rd.
I'm sorry, July 23rd, what did I say?
Yeah, 3rd.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you.
You did it already.
Yeah, going too fast here. So yep, July 23rd for that. And then the last thing that I just wanted to also share is that, this project, as Josh shared, this remains a public-private partnership. And as the public realm of design advances, we are starting to think about, development of the towers as well. We are a long way from where we started back in 2017 with the initial RFP and selection of AECOM as the development partner. And so given the conditions that exist today, AECOM and Ramsey County have determined that the best course of action is to include a local development partner in this project. And so that's the sort of initiate tower solicitation laid out there. We are initiating feasibility study analysis to kind of understand market conditions as they sit today. And then we are working on a solicitation strategy to evaluate development partner selection.
Victoria,
And
are
are they still looking at phase between the different towers? There's 3
Yes.
towers, and are they doing just the one to begin with, and then,
The
Or what?
towers will still be phased. Yep.
okay.
So just to be clear, sort of, is AECOM still with us? We're just gonna pick a local developer to work with AECOM with us?
Correct.
With
We're
us, with
adding a
AECOM?
local development.
We're
partner.
adding a local
Yep.
development, so AECOM will still stay the master, or not the master, the
AECOM is
definitely not say master, the general developer, or the
core developer, yes.
yeah, okay, thanks, yeah.
For clarity, has Ramsey County already invested 26 million into this project? So what's the 26 million?
So in December of 22, the county board committed $26 million, but only of that, only 1.8 has been actually allocated to the project. The other is just sort of.
Just lingering.
Sitting in the
Okay.
project
Yeah.
account.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Supposedly for a match, that's gonna be for hopefully more
Yes.
to match a state
Absolutely.
grant that
That's
we're
the goal.
still going for.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I guess I just want to hear a little more about this local developer,
Yeah.
because this feels like a last sentence at 3:10 and it's a surprise. So just say more about that. Is it because I know at some point there was a funding issue, like just say more about that.
Yeah, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, Martin, it may have sounded like that. I think what we're trying to. No, and it was part of, I think, just like moving fast and trying to talk about it. I think what we are learning is this is coming out of a post-pandemic world. We're going to need development partners who have a vision in this project too. And AECOM cannot be the sole version of this.
Okay.
Not because they don't have the capacity, not because they don't have the vision, but because this project with its potentially 4 towers with 4 very different uses, who knows, it's going to demand it. And I think the other additional piece, and I think that's important right now, if we had to start tomorrow, we'd have to phase it because we don't have enough money to build the entire project. The more partners we have alongside of us, the easier this project gets to build, the full totality. And bringing in the private sector participation, bringing in the state participation, because we can demonstrate that we have multiple partners. And I think one thing I'll just elaborate on what we learned kind of during the pandemic, but also in the post-pandemic, is that there are developers who have really good discipline, like they're disciplined, but they know their focus. And I think that's where we're really kind of trying to say, let's tap the shoulders of some folks who really understand the local dynamics, and understand the local market, because I think that's going to bring a project out of the ground faster than it is continuing to try to like cultivate this big, massive vision that's been shown and I think there's still merits there, but it's, you know, how long are we gonna wait for a 55-story tower,
Right.
which was what kind of was shown in one. So I think this is just a renewed focus and frankly, a 5-year, you know, we've been at this for 5 years.
Yeah.
Look back at who else wants to be a part of this vision, too.
That's really helpful. And then you said 55 story tower, which made me think, did we ever get cleared with the river height issue? Absolutely not.
I'll try to tackle this.
Okay.
Mr.
I'm
Chair,
sorry.
Commissioners, just one of two things. I just want to specify, when we talk about a local development partner, we're talking about a residential development partner.
Yeah.
Somebody who understands how to put together a residential capital stack.
Oh.
Not that our friends at AECOM can't do that. The Minnesota market's unique.
Yeah.
We've got additional barriers, rent control being one. They're going to need to know how to navigate that really well.
Mhm.
And the Twin Cities is a unique market for a variety of reasons. So that's the impetus there. The second piece, being on the MERCA code amendments, we're still in conversations with the planning and economic development team, at the city. We believe that they're coming together on a variety of, we'll say compromises.
I'm looking at the one city guy.
I know. We are in conversation with, planning and economic development staff almost weekly at this point. And so, we don't have any fear that if, that were to bubble up, that, they'll alert us. And I know, Josh has had conversations with their PED directors.
Great.
It's evolving in a good way.
Okay, I am a little confused though, because if we have a developer, AECOM. So do they hire the contractor, or do we, the partner, or do we've already agreed to have them be the developer, so how do we just bring in somebody else, or do they bring in somebody else?
I think, just really quick, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, this is very comparable to what's happening at Rice Creek Commons, where you have a development team. You have Lattice serving as kind of the overarching developer, if you will, but they have a partnership with Inland Development and what's the single family residential, Tradition Homes. So they're just organizing the development team. This is pretty comparable to that, where you've got AECOM in partnership with a local development partner that will build out the residential side. And then, and so it'll be written into the development agreements for each parcel that's sold. So it's consider it like 4 lots.
But they all go through AECOM, right?
There'll be purchase agreements with the county. And so it will be, whether it's AECOM or it's the local development partner, that will be a purchase and sale agreement negotiated with Ramsey County.
Okay, that doesn't, I mean, I thought everything that, other than the part that we already sold at Rice Creek Commons and is being developed. That we have a developer that, a Lattice that is gonna do the rest of it.
Yeah, Commissioner, maybe I'll say, this is not atypical what we're doing here. So we're not cutting new cloth. And I think we fully anticipated even back 5 years ago when we initiated this, that AECOM was going to bring in both equity partners, so financial partners, as well as potentially other developers who are going to bring their individual talents to building an office, a hotel, a residential. I think where we're at today is a renewed focus in this. It's kind of a check-in to see where the local marketplace is, because we're 5 years after we did our original solicitation. So let's see who else is engaged in an effort. And I think we're focusing on the local one because we think that's where the success is going to lie. But also that we really want to really kind of hone in on, like, we really want development partners that are really activated to go. Because I think it really complicates a project like of this scale and complexity. to phase it out. It's probably gonna be more costly to everybody. And so how do we bring on these parts and pieces earlier and faster? And I think that's why we're taking
And-
kind of a renewed in.
And basically my question is, who hires who? To do
Oh.
this. So, because we've got to deal with AECom and it sounds like we're gonna say, well, we're not gonna give you that part now, we're gonna do it this way. It's just like with Alatus, we're working through them. So we're working through AECom to bring on other partners.
Yes, this is
Okay.
we're working it together, yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to
Yeah.
No,
go back on
Yeah.
what we had already agreed to.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Wow.
Good discussion.
There's a lot.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Today.
I'm staying at the hotel on the river.
Yes, oh, and yeah, I think most of us are actually.